The jungle was old, ancient. It had stood for centuries, a silent witness to the passage of time, its secrets buried deep within its thick foliage. It surrounded the men as they walked, its dense canopy blocking out the sun, casting long shadows on the forest floor. They were intruders in its domain, strangers in a land that was both beautiful and treacherous. Dr. Lewis, his boots sinking into the damp earth, brushed aside a curtain of vines. He adjusted his spectacles, the lenses fogging up in the humid air. The air was thick with humidity and the buzzing of unseen insects, creating a symphony of sounds that was both mesmerizing and unsettling.
Are we lost, Lewis? The question hung in the air, heavy with concern.
This was Professor Caldwell, the historian, a man whose knowledge of ancient civilizations was unparalleled. His face, weathered like old parchment, was creased with worry, each line telling a story of countless expeditions and discoveries. Lewis glanced at the compass, its needle wavering uncertainly, as if unsure of its own direction.
Not lost, just misguided. His voice was steady, but there was a hint of doubt. The temple lies beyond that ridge, I can feel it. His conviction was palpable, a beacon of hope in the oppressive jungle.
Beside him, Ilara, the linguist, wiped sweat from her brow, her determination unwavering despite the harsh conditions. Her eyes, sharp and alert, scanned the undergrowth, ever watchful for any signs of danger or clues to their destination.
I don't like this. This place, it hums. Her voice was tinged with unease, the jungle's eerie ambience weighing heavily on her.
They pressed on, deeper into the green abyss, each step taking them further from the world they knew and closer to the heart of the unknown. The whispers started subtly. At first, they thought it was the wind rustling through the leaves, but the wind was still. The whispers persisted.
Did you hear that?
Ilara murmured, her hand resting on the butt of her revolver. The jungle seemed to press in closer, the air growing heavy.
Hear what?
Caldwell snapped, his voice tight with tension.
Voices.
Lewis breathed. He could feel a prickling sensation on the back of his neck, like he was being watched. They pushed onward, their senses on high alert. The whispers grew louder, morphing into soft, unintelligible murmurs. The jungle itself seemed to be closing in, the air thick with a palpable dread. The path was treacherous, swallowed by the relentless growth of the jungle. Every step forward felt like a battle against nature itself, as if the jungle was trying to reclaim its territory. Roots, thick as a man's torso, snaked across the ground, threatening to trip them. Each root seemed to have a life of its own, twisting and turning, making the journey even more perilous. The sunlight, what little managed to pierce the dense canopy, cast long, dancing shadows. These shadows played tricks on their eyes, making them see movement where there was none, adding to the eerie atmosphere.
This is madness. We should turn back. The fear in their voices was palpable, a reflection of the growing tension among the group.
Caldwell muttered, wiping his brow with a trembling hand. The oppressive heat and the weight of their mission bore down on him, making every step feel like a monumental effort.
The temple is just ahead. The sight of the ancient structure gave them a glimmer of hope, a beacon in the midst of the overwhelming jungle.
Lewis said, his voice firm despite the tremor in his heart. He knew they had come too far to turn back now, and the promise of discovery drove him forward. Ilara, her eyes narrowed, scanned the shadows. She had unsheathed her machete, its blade glinting ominously in the dappled light. Her instincts were on high alert, sensing danger lurking just out of sight.
Something isn't right. The unease in her voice was unmistakable, a stark contrast to the earlier determination.
She whispered, her voice barely audible above the cacophony of the jungle. The sounds of unseen creatures and rustling leaves created a symphony of dread. The path led them deeper into the heart of the jungle, toward a darkness that seemed to pulse with an ancient, malevolent energy. Each step they took felt like a descent into the unknown, where the line between reality and nightmare blurred. The temple emerged from the foliage like a specter. Its stone facade, once grand, was now choked with vines, its walls crumbling under the weight of centuries. A sense of oppressive silence hung in the air, broken only by the frantic chirping of startled birds.
By God.
Caldwell breathed, his eyes wide with awe. Lewis approached the entrance, his hand tracing the weathered carvings on the archway. They depicted grotesque figures, their eyes wide with agony, their mouths frozen in silent screams.
This is it, the Temple of Shadows.
He whispered, his voice tight with a mixture of fear and excitement. Taking a deep breath, Lewis stepped across the threshold, his footsteps echoing ominously in the deathly silence. The air inside the temple was stale, thick with the scent of decay and something else. Something ancient and unnameable. The walls were adorned with murals, faded but still vivid, depicting scenes of ritual sacrifice and unspeakable horrors.
This place, it's unholy.
This language, it's ancient, older than anything I've ever seen.
Alara began to translate, her voice low and halting.
Here, it speaks of souls, trapped, bound to this place.
Lewis felt a chill run down his spine. Her words seemed to hang in the air, heavy with a sense of impending doom. Section 7. When the Earth Spoke. As if in answer to Caldwell's words, the temple shuddered. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling as the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. A low, guttural groan echoed through the chamber, seemingly emanating from the very walls themselves.
What's happening?
It's waking up, the temple. It's waking up.
The tremors intensified, throwing them off balance. Cracks snaked across the walls, and the air grew thick with the stench of decay and something else. Something distinctly metallic. The whispers had reached a fever pitch, morphing into screams of rage and agony that seemed to claw at the edges of their sanity. Section 8. Faces of the Forgotten. From the shadows, figures began to emerge. They were grotesque parodies of human beings, their flesh rotting, their eyes burning with an unholy light. They moved with a jerky, unnatural grace, their skeletal hands outstretched, their mouths open in silent screams.
Dear God.
Caldwell gasped, his back pressed against the altar, his eyes wide with terror.
They're not alive!
Alara raised her revolver and fired, the sound echoing through the chamber. The bullet passed through one of the figures, but it didn't even flinch. It continued to advance, its eyes fixed on her with an insatiable hunger.
That something else.
Section 9. Trapped. Panic seized them. The air was thick with an oppressive silence broken only by the distant echoes of their own frantic breaths. They were trapped, surrounded by the vengeful spirits of the temple's past. These spirits, once guardians of the sacred grounds, now twisted by centuries of anger and sorrow, loomed over them with malevolent intent. Lewis, his heart pounding against his ribs, knew escape was impossible. Every path they had taken seemed to lead them deeper into the labyrinthine structure, each turn more disorienting than the last. The temple had them now. Its ancient walls seemed to close in, whispering secrets of those who had perished within its confines. It wouldn't let them go. The very air seemed to thicken, pressing down on them, making every breath a struggle. He looked at Alara and Caldwell, their faces pale with terror, and a terrible truth dawned on him. They were not the first to be ensnared by the temple's dark allure, and they would not be the last. The Temple of Shadows wasn't just a place of death, it was a prison for souls. The walls seemed to hum with the energy of countless trapped spirits, their anguish palpable. And they had just become its newest inmates. The realization hit them like a tidal wave, their hopes of escape dashed against the rocks of despair. The last thing he saw, before the shadows swallowed him whole, was Caldwell's face, contorted in a silent scream, his eyes reflecting the horrifying truth of their fate. The darkness consumed them, leaving nothing but the echo of their terror. They were trapped, forever bound to the Temple of Shadows, their souls condemned to wander its cursed halls for all eternity. The temple's sinister grip tightened, ensuring that their suffering would be endless, their cries unheard in the eternal night.